I got laid off 6 months ago and now I need a new job, but every single design job that I've applied for needs you to know 3D. Looks like it's time to learn Blender. Blender isn't actually that scary. You ever used Illustrator before? They have a Pathfinder type tool that makes you essentially make any shape that you want. You ever animated in After Effects? I'm so sorry to hear that, but they do have things like nulls and keyframes which essentially work the exact same way. Now I'm not gonna lie to you guys and say that I have no 3D experience. Before this, I actually managed to complete the infamous donut tutorial 3 years ago, and then never touched the program again. So for all intents and purposes, I'm just a humble artist looking to add another skill to my toolkit, and after using Blender for a month, I gotta say, learning is kinda crazy, I can't lie. Like, I know that sounds stupid, but when was the last time that you sat down and dedicated several hours each day trying to actively learn something completely new? I didn't even do that at university, but I'm gonna walk you through what I did here, how I did it, and how worth it everything was. For the next 30 days, I only have one goal: to create my little guy over here, DUSTR in 3D. Now, you might be thinking, that's easy, just watch a tutorial. I tried, but unfortunately there are no DUSTR specific tutorials, so I guess we're unfortunately just gonna have to learn the basics of modeling, lighting, composition, sculpting, modifiers, shading nodes, UV unwrapping, rigging, camera animation, shaping, compositing, rendering, weight painting, and geometry. Fine. I watched 127 Blender videos. If you wanna walk the same path as me, they'll be linked in the description. For your sake and my sake, mainly my sake, I won't be going through every single one in extreme detail, but I'll be sure to make you guys know which one's the absolute most helpful. Alright, first things first, how the fuck do you move around in 3D? So, during my Blender month, I actually wrote a little diary entry each day so I knew exactly how I was feeling after doing each task. I'm not gonna lie, the first week was kinda rough, but we'll get to that. Let's just start off with day 1. The very first tutorial that I watched in this entire 30-day challenge was the CG Fast Track Beginner tutorial, and let me tell you, this literally could not have been more helpful if it tried. They did such a good job at explaining not just what they were doing, but why they were doing it. So even if you don't know how to move around yet, this is undisputably the best starting point for Blender. I even remade the entire thing without the tutorial right afterwards, and it only took me 15 minutes. I felt like a damn speedrunner. Since I was so pumped up from the little Minecraft structure I just made, I decided to move right under part 2. And oh boy, there's an entire sword! Today, I finished the sword. At this point, according to my diary entry anyway, I felt like a newborn baby. But if a newborn baby can make a sick-ass sword like this, then that is one cool-ass baby. The tutorials took me a little bit longer than I'd like, but I guess I was making tons of notes along the way, so it wasn't too bad. There's also 2 separate notes here about me complaining about shader nodes, and they're both from day 2. And there's a lot more where that comes from in day 3. I made this sword with the tutorial the day before, surely I can make it all by myself now. It seems as if I am gravely mistaken. I got to about here before giving up, and I'm gonna be real, that's pretty damn good for day 3. I actually don't think I gave myself enough credit back then. Here's a few things that I stumbled on though. First off, I forgot that wireframe mode existed, so selecting through the entire mesh was an absolute pain. Also, the guard and the handles were made in quite literally the least optimal way possible, but the topology was still better than those idiots making 3D with AI, so I'll take it. And oh yeah, the sword put on a bit of weight by accident. I kind of forgot that we're working with 3 entire dimensions here, so next time I'll make sure to actually swivel around the entire thing before I'm done. I think the biggest takeaway from day 3 though is that I can now finally navigate around Blender without crying. Day 4 was us trying out Internet Girl's first render tutorial. Here I learned a lot about the basics when it came to modeling, like how you can pretty much just make anything just by extruding and insetting. Though I did get a little bit confused at the time because the menus were changed between Blender 2.9 and Blender 4.0, so that's just something to keep in mind if you get overwhelmed very easily. Alright, here's some key takeaways from the video. First of all, if you get stuck, I'm begging you, please just look at the comments. I can absolutely guarantee you that somebody else had the exact same issue as you, and then somebody else helped that person out with the exact same problem that you had. Also, physics simulations will crash a lot. I'm talking Adobe levels of crashing even if you have a good PC, so make sure you save all the time. At one point, sculpting was mentioned briefly, so of course I opened up the sculpting menu and scrolled around to see what sort of options I had to work with. And it just kept on going. That day, a single tear rolled down my face. This was just yesterday's task again, but with no tutorial. If we completely ignore the shader nodes, I think I did a pretty decent job. I still didn't get shader nodes and still don't to this day, to be honest, but I was picking up on the occasional roughness here and the metallicness there, so we're slowly getting there. Now, it's time for the one tutorial that everybody does at least once in their Blender career. How to animate sex in Blender donut. It's the donut tutorial. You already knew this would come up at some point in this video. It's a pretty easy starting point, and now I remember why so many people do this as their very first tutorial. I got slightly stuck with the icing mesh, but I got through it after a little bit of troubleshooting. One thing I've noticed after looking at like 100 tutorials this month is that most of Blender is just running into issues and then finding the best way to fix those issues. And trust me, you will run into a lot of issues. At this point it was 1 PM and I already needed a nap. Learning 3D is tiring. It was now the weekend, and I thought it would be a sensible idea to take a little break and absorb all the knowledge that I learned this week. So all I did today was make this plate. Cool plate. It's been almost a week since I did my first tutorial. Can I model it again without watching the video back? Surprisingly enough, yeah! It does help that there's basically only one node and incredibly simple modeling, but hey, we take those. It did take me ages to figure out why some settings weren't working with the renderer, but the fact that I was able to troubleshoot it without watching the video back means that we were actually learning something. This week I was faced with the harsh reality of cycles render times, and I unfortunately found out what n-gons are. Now I love Gon, but man do I hate n-gons! On day 8 we finished up the donut, which means that it took us 2 days to get through all of this, which is kinda mad because when I did the tutorial 3 years ago back then, it took me an entire week! One thing about animating in Blender is that if you've used keyframes before, this is all pretty self-explanatory. I'm honestly kinda surprised how much my experience with other programs transfers over here. Now all we have to do is render out our donut in 13 hours? Well, since the render was 13 hours long, I figured I'd just leave it to render overnight. Here's the finished donut. You can't tell me that you wouldn't go absolutely crazy on this plate right here. God, this looks so good. And I got tons of notes from this too. I still had the entire rest of the day left, so I thought it would be a good idea to brush up on some 3D basics like lighting and shadows, so I figured I'd check out this video right here from the funny donut man.
So the first lesson and very important point to remember is that you shouldn't fear shadow.
I felt like I was in school again, just slowly drifting off while taking notes, but it was genuinely really helpful. I know what a fill light is now and probably should have found out before I spent an excessive amount on my lighting setup, but hey, at least I know stuff now. How about we put all that lighting knowledge to the test? With a test. I got some 3D models provided at the end of the last video that I talked about, and now I had to light them up myself. Pro tip, don't forget that you can move stuff around in the top view. Doing this and expecting the light to go where you want them to go is just not gonna work out. For this guy, I added the main light below him to make him look all ominous and spooky, an orange light behind because I thought it would look kinda nice with a cigarette, and a final one up and behind to act as a sort of rim light so his black hat and clothes didn't fully fade into the background. I don't know what happened with this one. I couldn't get anything to work, so I just gave her a little phone light and just left it at that. I'm really happy with how this last one turned out though. I slapped in a HDRI and then started adding in lights, and I mean, it lit up the place fine enough I guess, but there's no actual lights here. Sure, I guess I could model some lights so it made sense, but that's not what this challenge is about. And then, I used my brain for half a second and was like, oh! There's windows there! And then added in 2 big area lights coming in from there. It's nothing crazy, but I felt like I just solved a fun little puzzle in the Zelda dungeon. I then watched the proper way to light it, and I felt like I still solved the puzzle, but in the least efficient way possible. See, I was trying to replicate the sun beaming in from the outside. Why didn't I just use a sunlight? Blender pro tip, most of the time the answer is probably pretty simple. Just think about how the scene would work in real life and then just try to do that in Blender. I haven't actually modeled anything from scratch yet other than this plate, so today we're gonna try to do something nice and simple. A plate of cookies. I'm starting to understand how to make basic shapes now. Like, this is just a sphere cut in half and squished, but the chocolate chips actually beat my ass for a little bit. In my mind, this is just a cone with a tiny bit at the top rotated, but of course you can't rotate a single vertex. So the next step in my mind is, oh, easy. Just add a loop cut here, and then there'll be more vertices and you can rotate them no problem. No! No loop cuts allowed! This is a common problem apparently. It looks like you can't loop cut n-gons, whatever the fuck that means. So instead, I made a cylinder, loop cut that, merged the top points, a little bit of scaling, and ta-da! I remember the basics of sculpting from some other tutorials that I watched and used way too many tools to help make this cookie look a lot more fucked up because, as you guys know, if a cookie looks too perfect, it just looks way less tasty. Now here's the hard part. I still don't know how nodes work. I made it vaguely cookie colored myself, but I would be here for fucking centuries before I figured out how this shit works on my own, so I looked up a cookie texturing tutorial on YouTube. And boy am I glad that I did, because how would I know any of this? I grouped it up and made some sense of it, but realistically, if I need to do this again, I am just gonna copy and paste the nodes from this file, let's be real. I did have the idea to use noise myself, so I am glad that I was kind of on the right track, but knowing what to plug into where to get it to look right is gonna take a bit of time. At least I shaded the chocolate chip myself. That's something. After all that, here are the final renders. This one in Eevee just looked really fucking bad. This was a bit more atmospheric, and then my final render was in cycles. While still not that great, at least it looked a little bit tastier. All I had on my task list for today was to learn about this bad boy, and it turns out surprisingly simple. 90% of the time you only need to adjust like 3 of them, which is very nice to know. I also learned about Fresnel and dielectric materials, so that's kind of fun. Turns out learning stuff is enjoyable when you actually care about the subject. Who would have guessed? Anvil time! It's been almost 2 weeks. I figured I could handle an anvil by now, but oh man, is this harder than a donut! Some key lessons here though. Proportional editing is your best friend in Blender. This is when I properly started to become confident in Blender. I felt like I had all the tools I needed to make anything I wanted now. Even if it wasn't completely optimal, if you threw me into a dungeon with a PC and said make your PC setup in Blender or destroy your sealed copy of Barnia for the Game Boy Advance, it might take me a while, but I have full confidence that I'll be walking out one of the best games of all time. When it came to sculpting, there were a ton of options, but if you just kind of click about, you'll probably find something that works. There was a part at the end though that used texturing with sculpting, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to turn it on since the tutorial is from an old version of Blender, and as far as I'm concerned, a lot of 3D software is kind of unintuitive for beginners, so I'm leaving it here for now. Also, not a big fan of UV unwrapping. At the start of this month, I was like a sponge, happy to absorb all the watery Blender knowledge that I could, but near the end, I was reaching maximum absorption and could only take so much in each day. Like, my notes went from this to this. I think you can tell when I was starting to get burnt out, but we are still only halfway done. We just had to keep on moving. These sections will probably move a little bit faster now though, thanks to these notes, or lack thereof. On day 15, I started spiraling. My anvil looked fine while sculpting, but when I baked the normal map, it looked bad. So bad that I started reassessing this entire challenge. Like, I started making the anvil because it seemed like it would be good and helpful to learn all these modeling tips, but it's also an anvil. I hate to say it, but I'm not the world's #1 anvil fan. So while I did learn quite a lot, there are so many specifics to learn in Blender, and I didn't realistically see myself needing a lot of what we had to do here, so I had to ask myself a simple question. What did I want to do? Well, I wanted to get the basics of Blender down so I could model anything I wanted, but at this point in the challenge I hadn't actually decided what that was yet, since there are just so many things in Blender. I did know I was very bored of this anvil though, and I know for a fact that I'd just lose all motivation if I forced myself to trudge through the rest of it, so I figured it would be best to leave this here and move on to modeling something else, just like anything else in the meantime, just to keep my motivation going. Since I was doing a bunch of hard surface modeling over the past few days, I thought it only made sense to put what I learned to the test and make a different hard surface model from scratch with no tutorial. If you ignore the texturing, which is kinda hard to do, but just work with me here, I think it's a pretty decently shaped hammer. I mainly wanted to practice modeling. Any shading that I'm going to be doing over the next few months, I'm just going to look up how to do it online, because despite my notes, there are still way too many nodes that I just know nothing about. Today I learned how to render without making my PC explode. Bunny modeling! I finally started getting the general modeling workflow. It was a bit weird coming from a layered program like Illustrator though, where you make everything separately and just move things in front or behind, to Blender, where you just kind of cut holes out for limbs to make everything into one body shaped shape. Two cool takeaways here. First of all, loop tools are awesome! Look how cool this is! If you haven't actually touched Blender yet and this is your introduction to 3D, just trust me, this is one of the coolest things you've seen in your entire life. Also, it was neat learning how to model, but based on my experience using other programs in the past and just generally having a long history of making things, some things here just didn't feel as optimized as possible. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a fantastic tutorial and explicitly a beginner tutorial, but my hyper-optimized gamer brain just had a sense that things could be better, and I could get cleaner lines faster, I could get even better topology. I was once again feeling pumped to conquer the world of 3D. Let's finish up this bunny. Texture painting on the character was actually really cool. I mean, it takes a while and I'm still not sure how to make it look actually nice and smooth and good, but hey, I know how it works now. If you've ever rummaged around game files and come across weird textures like this, well, hey, these probably make a bit more sense now too. It was a Saturday and I was tired, so I just watched a cool video on topology. It was a Sunday and I was tired, so I just watched a cool video on topology. Again. The final week. Considering I literally couldn't move around in 3D without getting stressed out before, I think we've come a pretty long way. But there's still more to do. Unsurprisingly, this week has some of the absolute coolest stuff we've ever done before, and that's mainly because I actually kinda know what I'm doing now. At the start of the challenge, I knew that I wanted to create something cool at the end of it, but I didn't actually decide on creating my little guy here until the start of week 4. This meant that the final week would be filled with tons of cool character stuff. I ended up going with this easy Froggy tutorial by Ma, and let me tell you, this might just be the happiest I've ever been with a render so far. It only took 3 hours, I learned a lot, and it turned out awesome. Back to the bunny for a bit, because today we're going to be doing some rigging. This is my first time rigging anything ever, and I ended up using the Rigify add-on for Blender. Now, I have literally no benchmark for comparison, but it was pretty easy to use, I think, so I'd probably recommend it. Finishing the rig. I ended up doing a lot of weight painting here, which is pretty neat, and one of my favorite parts of the rigging process was realizing how utterly fucked up and mangled the fingers were. Like, I didn't even know fingers could get that fucked up, but after watching a video on how to fix my mistake, that's another problem that I now know how to fix for the future. It also gave me the idea to just model DUSTR at the T-pose when I get around to making him. I didn't really think that far ahead, but it will make the rigging process a whole lot easier if I end up doing it. In my finger fixing quest, I also saw a few vids pop up for shape keys, and holy shit, these are cool. This is all just with a mesh. I don't know if I'll need this for myself just yet, but it's always good to know what options I have. I wanted to make something with no tutorial today, so I looked around my room and I thought, hey, what better thing to try and model than a Joy-Con? They're small and have simple buttons, so how hard could it be? Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, this is as far as I got before I said, fuck it, GG's. I mean, some of it kinda looks like a Joy-Con, and I'm sure it could have been even less optimal than this, but all in all, I think more self-driven tasks and building up more muscle memory over time will eventually solve most of these issues. I really liked Eve's tutorials for the bunny, so I got a free trial to Skillshare to try and make another one of her characters. Blender is so funny because it is the one program I've ever used where you can follow a tutorial step by step perfectly and still have a completely different outcome. Like, my topology is nasty. Today I did the fingers, the hat, and the hair. I thought the hair would be an absolute ball ache to make, but it turns out there was yet another thing I just hadn't learned yet. This time being curves on a path. You can make this shape follow this curve and then move it all about. You can probably make all sorts of things with this, but for now we'll stick with the hair. Day 28 was my tutorial breaking point. I've done research into pretty much every single possible thing I could think of, so now I know what all the tools are, I just have to fuck around and find out. I'll still probably do the occasional tutorial to improve my workflow, but to improve my workflow, I have to actually have a workflow. All I could be bothered to do today was just make the jumper from this tutorial, but I got so fed up just pausing every 2 seconds, I wanted to just make my own stuff. So starting tomorrow, which on day 29 might be a little bit late, we're gonna finally try to make something actually really cool to practice before the big DUSTR challenge. Today we had to practice making a character with no tutorial, but who do I try and make? Well, there's only one creature that's awesome enough to be granted the privilege of being the first ever character that I create from scratch. And of course, that's a Chow. This was honestly really fun. I still had tons of tips fresh in my memory from all the tutorials that I did, like using square circles for better topology and using circular edge loops for limbs, so making this was honestly kind of a breeze. Now don't get me wrong, I still did get stuck sometimes, but it's honestly part of the fun, or at least a necessary part of the process to help you improve. Modeling their feet to come out of the bottom of the body looked kinda bad and was probably bad topology, I think. I still don't know how this shit works, but I knew that a way to get a better topology was to just chop a sphere in half. There you go. It honestly makes more sense with Chows too, since their feet just kinda go wherever and don't really seem super attached to the body. The final day. And of course we have to deal with UV unwrapping on the last day of the challenge. Now this might not sound like a problem, and at first I didn't think it was, but how the fuck do you unwrap a square sphere? Why is it painting like this? I tried like 20 different seam combinations and eventually just left it alone and painted directly under the UV map itself. Other than that though, painting's pretty fun. I even remember the little background trick that every tutorial has, but I thought it'd be quite fun to do a 360, so I made a little coliseum and then trapped the Chow inside. I was also genuinely shocked but incredibly happy that I remembered to do the whole camera empty parent thing for the animation, but hey, I guess I'm just built different. I played around a bit more and this was the end result. Now it might not be the best Chow render in the world, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't incredibly proud of my first ever finished character render with absolutely zero help. Now, it's time to move on to something that is objectively more difficult in every conceivable way possible. This is what the past month has been leading up to. I'll give my thoughts on Blender as a whole and everything that I learned in the conclusion, but for now, we have a little guide to make. I figured that with infinite time, I'd just keep working on it and quite literally never be satisfied, so I gave myself a time limit of 1 week to make the best thing that I could. Tutorials were allowed, but as I said at the start of the video, there were no DUSTR tutorials on YouTube. If anything, I might look up some stuff for shading, but even with that, I've got like hundreds of notes already, so I want to really just try and get by just using stuff that we've covered over the past month. In total, he took 26 hours. Here is how it went down. 5 minutes in and I was already stuck. The head looked really fucking weird for some reason, but I didn't know why until I realized, oh wait, he's missing half of his fucking skull. Yeah, I should probably use a better reference image if I'm going to be making DUSTR in 3D, so I called in Georgia to the rescue. One reference sheet later and we are back in business. After giving him space for a brain, I tried to make the ears the same way that I learned to make hair a few days ago, but they're a bit more annoying to work with than a standard mesh, so I just kinda sculpted them myself using a circle as the base shape. Back to the head and I started extruding out a snout because I guess he would have one if he was a little 3D dog guy, wouldn't he? Also by this point, I'm already adding subdivision to everything, but I don't actually know if I want it to look more smooth, realistic textures or more like a retro PS2 character, so I'm gonna just keep flipping back and forth and making sure it looks good both ways just in case. The shoes were surprisingly difficult to model, like the shape just wasn't looking shoey enough, even after looking up the coolest shoes ever for reference. When in doubt, sometimes you just go back to the basics. The fix here was to just make a circle and then cut off the bottom. Turns out it really is just that easy sometimes, huh? It's also giving massive Knuckles vibes, which I'm a big fan of. Moving on to the hands, and I didn't want to model hands because who would willingly model hands if it could be avoided? So we just gave him cute little circular paws instead. For the hair, I actually didn't want to use the hair method that I learned recently since it didn't work super well for the thick, rounded locks that DUSTR has. Instead, we tapered an oval and then made a bunch of copies. Ignore under the hair here for a second, we'll get back to that. At this point, I kinda had a structurally sound little guy, or at least I thought I did, which is why I had to put him to the Miximo test. While his proportions are a little bit different to your regular dude guy, as long as he didn't shit the bed and have all of his limbs detached while moving, I knew we'd be somewhat along the right path, and lucky for us, we were all good. Now I am gonna rig the model manually when it's all done, but I wanted to just make sure that we were on the right track. Back to Blender, and the face looked a little bit weird to me, so we ended up remaking the entire head a few times until it looked normal enough. At this point, I got bored working alone, and I started screen sharing my progress to my friend Vetis, who also just happens to be insane at 3D, and he immediately pointed out one crucial error that I made. DUSTR has no ass! Or any shape for that matter. Bro was looking like Plank from Ed, Edd n Ed. He was flat as hell! Now, I'm obviously new to 3D, so I didn't even notice that I was modeling it to make it look good only from one angle, but when you look at the before and after, genuinely insane. Also, it seems as if my tendency to draw flat characters from a single angle with minimal perspective strikes again. I really need to learn how anatomy works. Now that we've given new life to his cheeks and puffed out his pants a bit, I tried to fix up the topology around the arms by straightening things out a little bit and adding in a few cuts where I thought they were needed. This also helped his arms look less like literal straight lines, which was very helpful. Now, after making a funky little tail that was the base of the DUSTR model all finished. Or so I thought. Somehow, while I was screen sharing, Vetis convinced me to model hands because it would apparently look cooler than my incredibly awesome and highly detailed circles. I caved in. Time to boot up a hand tutorial. Now, I fully expected to be stuck on hands for at least 2 hours and hating every second of it, but it turns out that I can make some pretty decent hands in about 10 to 15 minutes. Crazy! This is all using the skin modifier, which is kind of like the hairstyle we did the other day, but not really. It's cool though. I would definitely recommend checking it out. Something I definitely wouldn't recommend, however, is having the fingers bent before rigging. They should be totally straight, or it is so much more likely that they're going to end up getting messed up after rigging. Anyway, on to rigging! I used Rigify again, since I've used it before and it seemed like the easiest way to get bones in the places that bones are meant to be. This took a lot, and I mean a lot of finessing, mainly because I'm kinda stupid and don't know how bones work, but after a little while, DUSTR was moving about. Now, it's all well and good being able to move about, but if you look stupid while moving, what's the point of moving in the first place? Yes, this is my way of saying we're finally moving on to the texturing. Since UV unwrapping and making textures takes a lot of commitment, I was finally at the point where I had to make a decision on the art direction. Do I make DUSTR have more polygons and more realistic textures, or do I go for a more stylized video gamey look? Well, considering I spent the entire past month learning the principles of 3D to make things look as realistic as possible, I decided to just ignore all of that and make it stylized! Hey, I did want to learn as many things as possible in this challenge, so just think of this as the final lesson. Now, how the hell does texturing work? We UV unwrapped DUSTR quite a few times actually, because it looked really bad at the start, and decided to make all the textures in Photoshop rather than just painting them on. As long as I knew where each of the colors and patterns were meant to go, it was just easier to get the exact same shapes from his design onto the texture like this. After several hours and some questionable texture warping that I'm going to do my absolute best to hide on camera, the texturing was finally getting somewhere. I even made the textures a little bit crunchier to give them a more authentic PS2 vibe. Now, I mentioned on like day 16 or something that any shading that we're going to have to do over the next few months, I am just going to look up, because there are so many nodes and I am not fully comprehending any of these anytime soon. Instead of watching a tutorial though, I just tagged in my friend Vetis, who helped walk me through how to set up some cool cartoon shading. Now, I'm still getting the hang of it, but I think this is how it works. So this is the base texture, this is the exact same texture but just slightly darker, and this controls how much of the darker shading is actually shown. When you mix them together, this is the result. And then for the cool black outline, you just apply a black emission to a different material slot, turn on backface culling, solidify modifier, offset to 1, flip the normals, material offset to actually select the black material that we just made, then crank that thickness up. And now he's a proper little gamer dude. The face was kind of difficult since I tried to import a bunch of different expressions, but they were all different sides of it because I'm kind of stupid. But the facial features were just a bunch of PNGs, so at the end of the day, it wasn't too bad. We gave him a new hairline. Bro was looking fresh as fuck. We did some bone rolling. Now, trust me, it's not as weird as it sounds. It's just so the fingers don't go all fucky whenever you curl them. I added in some bones for the ears and the tail since I thought that'd be quite fun to animate. And then after some final weight painting and bone testing, DUSTR was all wrapped up. Introducing 3D DUSTR. This was the culmination of 30 consecutive days in Blender, or I guess 37 if you count the time it took to actually make this, and I couldn't be more happy with it. I mean, maybe I could actually. I only just realized after rendering this that he's way shorter than the reference image, and it took me this long to notice, and he's also a little bit scuffed in a few different places, but hey, he's still pretty awesome to me. And thanks again to my boy Vets for the help and the feedback along the way. Now that this is done, there's only one question left. Can you learn Blender in a month? I mean, you just watched the video, right? Unless you skipped here all the way from the beginning, but either way, yes, you can. I don't even think it's necessarily necessary to do as much as I did. Of course, the more you do, the faster you'll improve, but most people have jobs or other things. As long as you can commit to like an hour a day, a single tutorial a day, or even just messing around in Blender a few times a week consistently, you'll have the basics down in no time. And don't compare your progress to other people's either. You never know what previous creative experience they have or how much time they have to practice. Just focus on yourself and you'll definitely get where you want to get to eventually as long as you stick to it. Even though I've completed the challenge now, I actually still kind of want to keep learning Blender. I fully expected to get burnt out at the end, put something up in my portfolio and have just enough skill to get by if I needed to at my job, but I think this has genuinely helped reignite the passion that I have for learning stuff, which is so cool. Like, I genuinely don't remember the last time that I felt like this, but I feel like I've grown more in the past month in Blender than I have anywhere else in the past year. Just thanks to the sheer consistency of doing this every single day for an entire month straight. I just want to say, it feels so weird to have this project done. Like, I've been so in it for so long that it feels so nice to finally have it out in the world. In fact, it took me so long to make this video that I actually managed to land a design job in the process, which was the entire reason that I even started this challenge in the first place. Now, I don't know if the 3D actually had anything to do with me getting a job, which is a little bit anticlimactic, but I did show up DUSTR in the final interview and the guy seemed pretty impressed, so hey, I'll count it. Also, here's some more 3D stuff that I did after the challenge. Look at that, I'm about that 3D life now, baby. If you like my stuff and want to support me, then why not like and subscribe? And also, check out my online art shop. I'm thinking of adding some cool 3D stuff up there too when I get the chance, so definitely be sure to be on the lookout. Hop on the Discord where we share art and we'll be hosting some cool art challenges, and I'll see you all when I eventually recover from this video. Thanks for watching, love you guys, peace.